Hello, my name is Austin RIdener, and I chose to do my presentation on the theme of loss in Sherman Alexie's short story, Do Not Go Gentle. He died 3 times that day. Mr. Grief squeezed his lungs tight, but muscular doctors and nurses battled that suffocating monster man and brought our boy back to life 3 times. On And the image that I chose was an image of a muscular doctor fighting off death. Um, and I figured that would be fitting for the quote. The reason why I chose the quote is it talks about how the main character is watching these doctors fight over whether or not, or fight with Mr. Grief on whether or not he's going to lose his son and experience the loss of his son. And then my next quote is, when you're hurting, it feels good to hurt someone or somebody else, but you have to be careful. If you get addicted to the pain causing, then you start hurting people who don't need hurting. If you turn into a pain delivering robot, then you start thinking everybody looks like Mr. Grief and everybody deserves a beating. And that was on page 97. I chose that quote because oftentimes when people feel immense loss, they get angry and they get hateful. And because of that, they get really aggressive and mean. And they can lash out at other people and hurt them. And the image that I had chosen was an illustration of the emotions of hurt, pain, betrayal, hate, regret, and every other negative emotion. And I felt it was a fairly accurate portrayal of the emotions of being angry as a result of grief and loss. Next quote is, my wife and I didn't even name our baby. We were Indians and didn't want to carry around too much hope. Hope eats your flesh like a spider bite, on page 97. And the picture that I chose was actually 4 pictures of a spider bite and how it eats away at your flesh, and your flesh kind of decays. And I figured that was fairly fitting for the quote. But I chose the quote because it is true. Sometimes you're so grief-stricken and experiencing so much loss that hope hurts, and it hurts to feel like you can hope for something. And you just kind of want it all to be over, and you're afraid that if you hope and you get your hopes up and then everything kind of goes south and goes the opposite way you want it to, it'll eat away at you and make you feel stupid and naive sometimes. My next quote is, sitting on the bowl, pants wrapped around my ankles, I was awake and paralyzed by the deadly venom of the grief snake, on page 98. And I chose a picture of a man who was sitting down and couldn't move because he was paralyzed by anxiety and depression. And oftentimes when you experience a loss as great as what's described in this short story, you get incredibly depressed, and you can almost feel paralyzed and weighed down by all of this loss and grief and sorrow. And it almost feels like the venom of a snake is coursing through your veins, causing you to just stay paralyzed and feel as though you can't move. Next up is, but hell, their kids were dying. What else were they going to do but punish the world for it? A father with a sick kid or child is an angry god. I know I would have earthquaked Los Angeles, Paris, and Rome and killed 1 million innocent people if it guaranteed my baby boy would rise back to his full life. And the picture that I had chosen was an illustration of an angry god pounding its fist on the earth. I chose this quote because just like a few slides ago, Sometimes when you've experienced a great loss and you're just grief-stricken, and you lash out at other people, and it's almost as if you would bargain or do anything to erase that experience, to bring back what you've lost. And this quote is a really good kind of example of that, of being willing to do anything to get back what you've lost, even if it means that it will come at the expense of other people, of innocent people. My next quote is, "But pretty soon everybody was taking their turn casting spells with chocolate thunder. Maybe it was blasphemous, and maybe it was stupid and useless, but we were all sick and tired of waiting for our babies to die." And that was on page 100. And the picture that I chose was somebody screaming out of one bullhorn, desperation, and then somebody from another bullhorn screaming, hope. And I chose this quote because it shows that even when you've experienced incredible loss, you get tired of it. Towards the end of the road, you kind of figure out, hey, well, sitting here and grieving and doing nothing, it sucks. It's tiring and it's useless. And you look for something that makes you feel better, that brings back hope, that makes you feel like you can get some control back, or makes you feel like you might be able to get back what you've lost and what's kind of escaped you. And that's what this quote depicts, is they were just tired. They were sick and tired of waiting for their babies to die, and they were willing to do anything out of desperation just to make themselves feel better, or at least forget it, or make them feel like something might change, that there might be just a little bit of hope. Next is, "I brought Chocolate Thunder back to the hospital, but it was my magical and faithful wife who truly believed it was going to bring our baby back to us." And that was on page 101. I chose this quote because even though they were losing their baby, their child was hooked up to, earlier in the story it says that it was hooked up, or the child was hooked up to millions of dollars worth of machines. And the child had died 3 times, been resuscitated 3 times. Even when on the brink of losing your child, you can still find faith. And that's what the wife had done. She was faithful. She believed that there was a way that they could get their baby back, that if they hoped hard enough, and if they had enough hope and fought hard enough and had faith in themselves and their child, and they would be able to, their child would live. They would be able to recover from the near loss of their child. And the picture that I had chosen was Step of Faith by Miranda. And it's an illustration of, it looks like Peter stepping off the boat, or at least a person stepping off of a boat, having faith that they can walk on water too. And I thought that was very, very befitting. And lastly, "She used up the energy of 2 batteries, and maybe our baby would have woken up anyway, and a few other babies never did wake up at all. But my wife still believes our son heard the call of Chocolate Thunder and couldn't resist it. Our beautiful, beautiful boy opened his eyes and smiled, even if he was too young to smile," on page 101. I picked this because it was a continuation of having faith even when experiencing immense loss. If at the end of the day, there's always going to be a light at the tunnel, whether your baby wakes up or your baby doesn't. This family, their baby woke up, and they found the light at the end of the tunnel, and they had faith, and they managed to escape the darkness of loss, and they managed to walk through the light at the end of the tunnel. And so the picture that I had chosen was Light at the End of the Tunnel. There's a Light at the End of the Tunnel by Fabrice Jacob. And I thought that was very befitting of the idea of there being a light at the end of the tunnel, even when you're risking the loss of your child. And lastly, my works cited page. And thank you so much for watching and sitting through my presentation. I appreciate it. I've enjoyed working on it, and I look forward to the next assignments in class.